Okay, so the first part of this lesson was graphing piecewise functions. Now we're going to be evaluating piecewise functions. So the question they're going to ask is evaluate f of -5. Okay, so that's the question. I know there's a lot of writing up here, but that's all trying to help you guys get it answered. All right, so evaluate f of -5. Now, that -5 there. Remember, if that -5 is in parentheses, that means that my x equals -5, right? Okay, so I've got two stretches of domain here. I've got a domain here, I got a domain here. I've got my x's that are less than -1. It's dealing with my square root function. I've got my x's greater than -1. That's dealing with my 3 function. So less than the square root, greater than my 3. Okay, so all I need to do is I need to look at this number here for -5 and figure out where does that fit in. Is -5 less than or equal to -1? Or is -5 greater than -1? All right, we should know that -5 is less than -1. So that means that this is the function that I'm going to use. Okay, so down below it says determine what function to use by checking the interval. Well, we need to use f of x equals the square root of x plus 5. Again, how did I know that? -5 is less than or equal to -1. So that means that I need to use my f of x equals square root of x plus 5. Okay, so once we get to this point here, this is just doing what we've already been doing before in like lesson 4, I think. Okay, so look at your x value. That determines which one of these you want to use. Okay, then once I do that, it's simply instead of f of x, I've got f of -5. And that equals square root of, equals square root of, and then if I've got a -5 here, I need a -5 in for this x, plus 5. So I find that f of -5 equals the square root of -5 plus 5 is 0. And the square root of 0 is just 0. Okay? And that's my answer. That's all I have to do for this. Okay, if I do go to my chart, remember this means that x is -5 and this is that my y is 0. So I should have the point -5, 0 on my graph, which I do right there. -5, 0 is on my graph. Okay, so we're just going to run through some different problems like this to practice. Whoops. All right, now we've got evaluate f of 3. That means that x equals 3. Okay, so if x equals 3, is 3 less than or equal to -1? Or is 3 greater than -1? Well, we should know that 3 is greater than -1, which means I need to use my f of x equals 3. Okay, so what function do I want to use? I want to use my f of x equals 3. Now, this one is a little weird here, okay, because my function is f of x equals 3. So I'm going to look at f of x equals, not f of x, I'm going to look at f of 3 equals, and then I need to plug in a 3 for all of the x's over here. Do you guys see any x's over there? No, there are none. Okay, so I'm just going to get that f of 3 equals 3, and that's just my answer. Okay, remember this is a constant function here, right? That one's a constant function. So if I look, all of my y values on this are going to be 3, right? Okay, so my answer is just 3. Wouldn't matter what my x value was as long as it's in that interval. Okay, so we got that one down. Let's do one more. I've got f of -1. Okay. We've got f of -1. So this one is probably the trickiest. My x equals -1. Okay. Is -1 less than or equal to -1? Or is -1 greater than -1? Well, crap. Both of those are dealing with -1. What are we going to do on that? Okay. Well, the key is this equals -1. And if I look at these up here, I've got x is greater than -1. Nope, that doesn't sound good. Or I have x is less than or equal to. That or equal to tells us that we need to use this function here. Okay? So determining which, I'm going to use my f of x equals the square root of x plus 5. because the square root of x plus 5 is if x is less than or equal to. That or equal to is huge. Okay? So I'm going to have my function then. The function I'm going to use is f of x equals the square root of x plus 5. Okay, but I don't want an x in there. I want an f of negative 1. And f of negative 1 equals the square root of negative 1 plus 5. What is negative 1 plus 5? Well, that would be a 4. So it's the square root of 4. And f of negative 1 equals, oops, not 4, would equal 2. So my answer for that is 2. Okay, so I've run through 3 different problems with you guys. All right, ran through 3 different problems. I want you guys to try and do this practice on your own. Real quick before we do that, though, I just want to make sure we cover this. That is x less than negative 2. This one here is the tricky one. Remember, that's a bounded interval. So that means that x is between, okay, my x is between negative 2 and 2. And then this last one here is x is greater than 2. Okay, now pause that video. Now that you guys know that, make sure you pause the video. I want you guys to work on these together at your table again, and then I'll come back and explain them. Okay, so let's go ahead and run through this here real quick. Okay, again, I've got negative 4. Okay, that means that my x equals negative 4. Okay, where would negative 4 fit in? Well, negative 4 is less than negative 2, correct? Negative 4 is less than negative 2. So my function that I'm going to use is f of x equals x plus 3. Okay? So I'm going to use f of x equals x plus 3. Okay? And then instead of an x in there, I've got a negative 4. So I'm going to have a negative 4 plus 3, which gives me f of negative 4 equals negative 1. Here's my answer for 1. Okay, next, I've got f of negative 1. That means that x equals negative 1. Where does negative 1 fit in? Okay, well, negative 1 would be between negative 2 and 2, correct? So I'm going to use this function here. F of x equals x squared. So I've got f of x equals x squared. Okay, what do I have in there for my x? Well, I've got a negative 1 in there for my x, so I'm going to have a negative 1 squared, which gives me f of negative 1 equals negative 1 squared gives me a positive 1. There's my answer for that. Then my last one, I've got that x equals 2. Okay, I've got x equals 2. Where does that fit in? Well, we haven't used this last one. Does it fit in there? No, because x is greater than 2. Okay, x is greater than 2 does not include 2. But this one here, look at that. It's got that less than or equal to. Okay, so x is less than or equal to 2. So I'm going to have to use this middle one again. Because I've got x equals 2. This is the one there that has the or equal to part. Okay, so I'm going to use that same one that I just used. It's f of x equals x squared. Okay, what goes in for the x there? Well, I've got a 2. So I'm going to have a 2 squared, which gives me f of 2 equals 4. Okay, you guys have, I think, 4 lesson practice, maybe a little bit more, I'm not sure, but they're going to have you guys graph them. Okay, they can be difficult. Please, please, please work on these together, guys. I'm telling you guys, you help each other out more than you know by working together. Okay, so make sure you work together on your lesson practices. When everybody get done, go up and check them, and then I will give you guys your homework.